Taylor Sheridan's 1923 takes place 40 years after the events of 1883. It's about the Dutton family with Elizabeth Strafford and Jack Dutton getting ready to get married. In 1923's episode 3, they're attacked and shot. But did they know they would have a baby before the attack? In this video, we'll discuss the theory of Elizabeth Strafford being pregnant and all the clues that tell us she's pregnant with Jack Dutton's baby. First off, do Elizabeth and Jack live through the attack? In the third episode of 1923, violence came to the Dutton family. Banner and his group attacked the Duttons and shot Jacob, John Sr., Jack, and Elizabeth. John Dutton Sr. died immediately, but Jacob, Elizabeth, and Jack seemed to live immediately after the attack. After Banner's attack, it seems likely that Elizabeth and Jack will live to see another day. Even though Elizabeth was shot in the stomach, she had a better chance of living than Jacob, and Jack's wounds were the least bad, which probably means he'll also live. Violence and John Sr.'s death will have a big effect on the Dutton family in the future, though. Emma Dutton, John's wife, will have to move on as a widow, and Jack will probably have to help his mother take care of her grief. Up next, if she's pregnant, how will it affect the baby? Many people think that Elizabeth Strafford will survive the attack in the third episode of 1923, even though she was shot in the abdomen. Keep this in mind. Was there any chance that Liz was pregnant with Jack's child before the attack? There's a good chance Elizabeth was pregnant. Liz and Jack had a long scene together before the attack where they got close for the first time. The showrunners may have wanted to make a big deal out of their getting together to hint at the possibility of a pregnancy. If Elizabeth was expecting, she'll likely have lost the baby when she was shot. And if she wants kids in the future, the writers may use the gunshot wound to show how hard it could be for her to conceive. Jacob Dutton also made fun of Liz getting pregnant. In the first episode of 1923, Jacob jokes that Liz and Jack will have a baby before they even get married. The book also says that Jack has a son named John Dutton Jr., and that John Dutton Jr. in turn has a son named John Dutton III. Elizabeth might be the mother of John Dutton Jr., but it's hard to know when this would happen. Followed by, will Jack Dutton be injured? After the attack in 1923 episode 3, which killed John Dutton Sr., we're left wondering about Jacob Dutton. Jacob was shot and hurt badly, and Cara Dutton worries that he may also die. Jacob's likely to live, which is good news. James Badge Dale, who plays John Dutton Sr., hinted that Harrison Ford's character is still alive. Spencer Dutton might have been taken out of Africa and back to the ranch by shooting Jacob. Spencer will be back in future episodes, which is good news for us. Moving on, where is Margaret Dutton? In the series, Taylor Sheridan follows the Dutton family for 40 years after the events of 1883. 1883 told the story of Margaret and James Dutton as they traveled across the Great Plains searching for a place to put the Dutton family ranch. Something bad happened to Margaret Dutton along the way, though. In 1883, Margaret was a character that many of us liked. Faith Hill played the family matriarch. She took care of her husband, James Dutton, and their family. She was strong even when bad things happened, like when their daughter, Elsa Dutton, was killed by a dirty arrow. Even though Elsa had died, Margaret knew she had to keep going. So, what did she do before 1923 happened? In the first episode of 1923, Elsa says a voiceover that Margaret died because she was frozen. She wrote a letter to Jacob a year before she died to tell him about her situation. When she was found dead, the rest of her kids were found hungry and barely alive. James died before she did, but not for long. Not to mention, how many kids did the Duttons have? There were 3 children born to James and Margaret. Elsa Dutton died in 1883, but Spencer and John Dutton Sr., their other 2 sons, made it through the harsh winter. In 1923, they were both the main characters. The older John was a child when James and Margaret moved to Montana for the first time. Later, he helped build the Dutton family ranch with his uncle, Jacob. In 1923, when we first met him, he was married to Emma Dutton and had a son named Jack. John and Emma probably have more kids in the future, but at the start of 1923, they only have Jack. Spencer's life went in a very different direction. Spencer was born in Montana long after James and Margaret moved there. He would have lived through World War I. At the start of 1923, he goes to Africa to hunt big game instead of moving to the ranch with his brother. Let's look at all the clues that prove Liz Strafford's pregnant with Jack Dutton's baby. After episode 3, everyone's been looking for answers to this question. The Duttons went to town and stayed there for a night. Jack and Liz, a young engaged couple, went to a speakeasy bar and had fun before going to a hotel for the night. Elizabeth and Jack come from families with traditional values, so they hadn't had sex yet. But after a night of fun and drinking, they gave in to their urges. When it's not important to the story, TV rarely includes sexual scenes. It could have been a scene to show how innocent the two were, but it could also be a sign that Elizabeth is pregnant with Jack's child. Not to mention what makes this theory harder to understand. But what happened at the end of episode 3 when the traveling party was on its way back to the ranch makes this theory harder to understand. In episode 4, War in the Turquoise Tide, we see that both of them made it through and do better than John and Jacob. Jack seems fine and has already improved, but Liz is stuck in bed and improving from surgery. As Jack and Kara help her, they notice she has a fever, which could make the gunshot wound even worse. Liz's mother shows up at the ranch and tells her to return to the family home. Liz doesn't want to go back there because Yellowstone's now her home. Let's learn more about what we found out at the end of episode 4. At the end of episode 4, we find out that it took 3 months for Spencer to get Kara's letter asking him to come home. When episode 5 of 1923 returns to Paramount Plus in February, the story will likely have moved forward by 3 months. The time jumps are just not something we're used to at this point. That means we'll know if the ranchers could keep Banner's men out of Yellowstone, if Jacob survived the shooting, if Elizabeth is pregnant, or if we'll find out soon. At some point, one of the people we've met will have John Dutton III's father. At that moment, Jack, Liz, Spencer, and his new British girlfriend Alexandra are the most likely candidates. Neither of them have children yet, and they're more likely on their way back to Yellowstone Ranch. Coming up, 1923's connection to 1883. 1923 starts a long time after the events of 1883, but in many ways it's strongly connected to the series. We were shocked when Paramount Plus said that 1883 was a limited series that was only supposed to run for 1 season. We thought there would be more stories about the Dutton family's past, but instead of keeping that popular show going, Sheridan decided to jump ahead in time with a new show. The other show is called 1923. The story takes place in the early 1920s, which is what the title says. So, 1923 is a follow-up to 1883. The last series ended with James Dutton arriving in Montana's Paradise Valley. The new series starts with James' brother, Jacob, and his wife, Kara, raising James's son and setting up their new home in the West. Because the series takes place in the 1920s, it'll also talk about the Great Depression and other historical events in the same way 1883 did. The timeline connects perfectly with 1883. Next, the continuity between the two series. Only 2 of the people from 1883 are in 1923. Because of the time jump and so many characters dying in 1883, there's little in common between the two shows. But 2 characters from the earlier prequel have important roles in the current show. At the end of 1883, Elsa knew she would die, so she went to Paradise Valley with her father James to be buried. She died in her father's arm in the show's last episode. Even though Elsa's death broke our hearts, she now guides the audience through her family's story, including her brother John Dutton Sr. At the start of 1883, when Audie Rick played John Dutton Sr., he was only 5 years old. In 1923, he was shown as an adult. James Badge Dale plays him. You might know him from many TV shows like 24, Hightown, and Rubicon. So far, John's the only character seen in both shows. Finally, the connection with Yellowstone. Even though there aren't many connections between 1923 and 1883, there are some, and they make it feel like the Yellowstone universe is whole. The turning point for 1923 has already happened, and as the Yellowstone prequel gets ready for the second half of its first season, the creator Taylor Sheridan's vision is becoming clearer. When explaining why he chose 1923 to trace the Dutton family tree, the creator said that the next prequel chapter in the Yellowstone universe takes place during a time of great drought when the Wild West was really becoming a relevant center of resources. And on that note, that is a wrap for this video. What do you think of Elizabeth being pregnant? Do all the clues point towards that? Let us know in the comments below. below, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. We'll see you at the next one.